At my mother's annual charity dinner, I was standing in her powder room, gripping the marble sink, when I heard her voice through the wall. She was in the formal dining room, talking to her closest friends, and she was laughing. That specific laugh she uses when she's about to say something cruel, but wants it to sound like a joke. I heard my name. Then I heard the words that made my blood go cold. Well, Cassidy is 39 now, still single, still living alone. I've given up hope she'll ever settle down. Some women just aren't built for family life. The room erupted in polite laughter. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My left hand was pressed against the cool stone, and I could feel the gold band on my ring finger, the one I'd been hiding on a chain under my blouse for 5 years. I reached up, unclasped the chain, and slid my wedding ring back where it belonged. Then I opened the door, walked into that dining room full of her friends and colleagues, and smiled. Because my mother was about to learn that the daughter she'd been mocking for years had actually been living the life she always wanted. She just hadn't been invited to see it. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most daughters would have confronted their mother privately. But I'm a civil engineer. I design load-bearing structures for a living. I understand tension, pressure points, and exactly how much weight a foundation can carry before everything collapses. What I felt in that moment wasn't rage. It was a calculation. My mother, Lorraine, had spent my entire adult life treating me like a failed project. I was the daughter who didn't marry the right kind of man. The daughter who chose a career in construction over charity luncheons. The daughter who, in her words, let herself go because I wore steel-toed boots to job sites instead of heels to country clubs. She didn't know that 6 years ago I met someone. His name is Jackson. He's a wildlife biologist who spends half his year in remote research stations studying migration patterns. He's quiet, brilliant, and completely uninterested in the social climbing that defines my mother's world. We got married at a courthouse with 2 friends as witnesses. No white dress. No reception. No guest list. And absolutely no Lorraine. I walked back into the dining room. The table was set with my mother's finest china, the kind she only brings out when she wants to remind everyone she has money. 16 guests, all dressed in their designer best, all part of her carefully curated social circle. Lawyers, doctors, a state senator's wife, the president of the Historical Society. My mother was at the head of the table, holding court like always. She saw me enter and her smile tightened. She'd been trying to set me up with a man named Brandon all evening. Brandon was a divorce attorney in his mid-40s, recently single and, according to my mother, perfect for someone at your stage. He was sitting 2 seats down from me, and he'd been making uncomfortable small talk all night about how hard it is to meet quality people these days. My mother had seated him next to me on purpose. It was a setup, and everyone at the table knew it. I took my seat. My mother was in the middle of telling a story about a friend's daughter who just got engaged to a cardiologist. She kept glancing at me, making sure I was paying attention, making sure I understood the message. You're falling behind. You're running out of time. You're embarrassing me. Then she pivoted. She turned to Brandon and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, you know, Brandon, Cassidy has always been so focused on her career. I think she just never prioritized finding someone. She said it with that sugary tone, like she was being understanding, but everyone heard the real meaning. She's a failure. She's alone. She's defective. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. A few people looked down at their plates. My Aunt Maureen, my mother's younger sister, gave me a sympathetic look from across the table. And my mother kept going. I mean, at 39, most women have settled down by now. But Cassidy's always been different. Independent. Maybe too independent. She laughed. A few people joined in, nervous, unsure. I felt my pulse in my throat. I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. This wasn't new. My mother had been making comments like this for years. Little digs disguised as concern. Public humiliation dressed up as motherly worry. But this time, something was different. This time, I had the wedding ring on my finger. This time, I had proof that her entire narrative about me was a lie. I picked up my water glass. My hand didn't shake. I took a slow sip and set it back down. Then I looked directly at my mother and smiled. Actually, Mom, I said, my voice calm and clear, I've been married for 5 years. You just weren't invited. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. 16 sets of eyes turned to me. Forks froze midair. Someone's wine glass stopped halfway to their mouth. My mother's face went pale. Not embarrassed pale. Shocked pale. Like I'd just told her I'd been living on Mars. What? She whispered. I held up my left hand, showing the gold band that had been hidden for so long it felt strange to have it in the light. I got married 5 years ago, I repeated. His name is Jackson. We have a house upstate. We've been together for 6 years. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the table, searching for someone to tell her this was a joke. But no one was laughing. Aunt Maureen's eyes were wide. The senator's wife leaned forward, fascinated. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Why, my mother started, but her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. Why would you hide that? I didn't look away. Because you told me that if I married someone you didn't approve of, you'd cut me out of the family. So I made a choice. I chose him. And I chose not to let you ruin it. The table erupted. Not loudly, but in that frantic whisper way that happens when rich people are scandalized. Aunt Maureen leaned over to the woman next to her, speaking rapidly. The senator's wife stared at my mother like she'd just witnessed a crime. Brandon excused himself to the bathroom and didn't come back. And my mother just sat there, frozen, her carefully composed mask cracking in real time. To understand why I hid my marriage for 5 years, you need to understand what it was like growing up as Lorraine's daughter. My mother didn't raise me. She sculpted me. Every decision I made was filtered through one question. What will people think? I wasn't allowed to play sports because it wasn't ladylike. I had to take piano lessons even though I hated them because cultured girls play instruments. I was enrolled in etiquette classes at age 7. My mother had a plan for my life, and it didn't include me having opinions. When I was 16, I told her I wanted to study engineering. She looked at me like I'd said I wanted to join the circus. Women don't do that kind of work, she said. You'll end up dirty and unmarried. I went to college anyway. Paid for it myself with scholarships and loans. I graduated with honors and got a job designing infrastructure projects. I was good at it. Really good. But my mother never asked about my work. She only asked if I was dating anyone appropriate. The word appropriate was her favorite weapon. It meant rich. It meant from the right family. It meant someone she could show off at her dinner parties. When I was 32, I dated a guy named Colin. He was a financial advisor. He wore expensive suits. He played golf. My mother loved him. She introduced him to everyone as Cassidy's boyfriend before we'd even been together for 6 months. Then I found out he was cheating on me with his assistant. When I broke up with him, my mother was furious. Not at him. At me. You'll never find someone that good again, she told me. That's when I realized my mother didn't care if I was happy. She cared if I made her look good. A year later, I met Jackson. We were both volunteering at a wildlife rescue event. He was quiet, thoughtful, and completely uninterested in impressing anyone. He wore old flannel shirts and hiking boots. He lived in a cabin with no cell service for months at a time. He was everything my mother would hate. And I fell in love with him immediately. I didn't tell her about him for 6 months. When I finally did, I made the mistake of being honest. I told her he was a biologist. I told her he didn't care about money or social status. I told her he made me laugh. She stared at me like I'd confessed to a crime. You're not serious about him, are you? She asked. I said I was. She said, if you marry that man, don't expect me to be part of it. So I didn't. Jackson proposed on a hiking trail at sunrise. No ring, just a question. I said yes. We got married 2 weeks later at a courthouse. My best friend, Simone, was there. Jackson's brother was there. That was it. No white dress. No reception. No Lorraine. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I just went back to my life, went to family dinners when required, and pretended I was still single. It wasn't hard. My mother never asked real questions. She only asked questions that confirmed what she already believed. Still no prospects, she'd say. And I'd shrug and change the subject. For 5 years, I lived 2 lives. At work and at home, I was Cassidy, Jackson's wife. We had a house. We had routines. We were building something real. But at family events, I was Cassidy the spinster. Cassidy the disappointment. Cassidy the cautionary tale. And I let her believe it. Because the alternative was letting her destroy what I had. But sitting at that dinner table, watching her use my life as a punchline, I realized something. I wasn't protecting my marriage by hiding it. I was protecting her. I was letting her live in a fantasy where she still had control over me. And I was done. After I revealed my secret, my mother didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at me like I was a stranger. Around us, the dinner party had turned into a spectator sport. People were whispering. Phones were being checked under the table. Aunt Maureen looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or call a lawyer. Finally, my mother stood up. Her chair scraped against the hardwood floor, loud and harsh. She looked at me, her face pale and tight. "We need to talk," she said. Privately. I didn't move. "No." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me." I said no. I kept my voice calm. "You've spent years talking about me like I'm not in the room. You've mocked me. You've pitted me. You've paraded me around like I'm some kind of failure you're trying to fix. So no, I'm not going to have a private conversation where you try to control the narrative. If you have something to say it here." The room went dead silent. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. My mother's hands were shaking. "You lied to me," she said, her voice breaking. "For 5 years, you lied. You gave me an ultimatum," I shot back. "You told me to choose between you and the man I loved. So I chose. And I chose him. I'm your mother. And I'm your daughter," I said. "But you've never treated me like one. You've treated me like a project. Like something you could fix or improve or show off. You don't care about my happiness. You care about what people think." She opened her mouth to respond, but Aunt Maureen cut her off. "Lorraine," she said quietly. "She's right." My mother's head snapped toward her sister. "Stay out of this." But Aunt Maureen didn't back down. "You've been doing this for years," she said. "Not just to Cassidy. To all of us. You've turned every family event into a performance. You've made everyone feel like they're not good enough unless you approve. And now you're upset because your daughter finally stood up to you." My mother looked around the table, searching for an ally. No one met her eyes. The senator's wife was studying her napkin. The Historical Society president was suddenly very interested in the wallpaper. Even Brandon, who had finally returned from the bathroom, looked like he wanted to leave. My mother's composure cracked. "Get out," she said to me, her voice shaking. "If you're going to disrespect me in my own home, then get out." I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked at her one last time. "I didn't come here to disrespect you," I said. "I came here because you're my mother and I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be happy for me. But I was wrong. You're not capable of being happy for anyone unless they're following your script." I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping. I heard Aunt Maureen say, "I'm leaving too." I heard other voices joining in. By the time I reached the front door, half the dinner party was following me out. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car in the driveway, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Maureen. "I'm proud of you." That took guts. Then another text. From Jackson. "How'd it go?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. I told them. 3 dots appeared. Then, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. I thought about the look on my mother's face. The silence at the table. The way her perfect evening had shattered in front of her friends. And I realized I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. Like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "I feel free," I typed back. Jackson's response was immediate. "Good. Come home." I made dinner. I smiled. I put the car in drive. And I left my mother's house for what I knew would be the last time in a very long time. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My mother didn't call. She didn't text. But other people did. Aunt Maureen called the next morning to tell me that after I left, 3 more guests had walked out. The senator's wife had apparently told my mother that she handled that poorly, which in rich person language is the equivalent of calling someone a monster. My mother's best friend, a woman named Diane, sent me a message saying she was sorry for laughing at the jokes. Over the next few days, I got messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Some were supportive. Some were nosy. A few were angry on my mother's behalf. But the one that mattered most came from my father. My dad has always been quiet. He lets my mother run the show. He nods and agrees and stays out of conflict. But 3 days after the dinner, he called me. "Cassidy," he said when I answered. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I should have stood up for you," he continued. "I should have told your mother years ago that she was out of line. But I didn't. And I'm sorry." My throat tightened. "Thanks, Dad." There was a long pause. Then he said, "I'd like to meet him. Your husband. If that's okay." I closed my eyes. "Yeah, Dad. That's okay." 2 weeks later, my father drove upstate to our house. He met Jackson. They talked about bird migration and infrastructure projects and fishing. My dad stayed for dinner. Before he left, he hugged me tight and whispered, "You did good, kiddo." My mother, on the other hand, never called. I heard through Aunt Maureen that she was telling people I'd embarrassed her on purpose. That I'd planned the whole thing to humiliate her. That I was ungrateful and cruel. Let her tell that story. I don't care anymore. A month after the dinner party, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. A handwritten letter on my mother's monogrammed stationery. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. The letter was short. It said, "You were right. I treated you like a project instead of a person. I don't know how to fix that. But I want to try. If you're willing." I stared at the letter for a long time. I showed it to Jackson. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think she's scared," I said. Scared of what? Scared that she's losing control. Scared that people saw who she really is. Scared that I'm not coming back. Jackson nodded. "Are you going back?" I thought about it. I thought about all the years of criticism, the ultimatums, the public humiliation, the way she'd made me feel small and invisible. But I also thought about the fact that she'd written the letter at all, that she'd admitted, even in her own limited way, that she was wrong. "Maybe," I said, "but not yet, and not on her terms." So I wrote back. I told her that if she wanted to be part of my life, she needed to meet Jackson. She needed to come to our home. She needed to see the life I'd built without her approval. And she needed to apologize. Not just to me, but to Jackson. For years of dismissing him without ever meeting him. I sent the letter. I didn't expect a response. But 2 weeks later, my mother showed up at my door. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. She was wearing a simple dress, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked nervous. "Can I come in?" she asked. I opened the door wider. Jackson was in the kitchen. He'd insisted on being there, even though I'd offered to do this alone. My mother walked in slowly, looking around like she was entering a museum. She saw the exposed beams I'd restored, the furniture we'd built together, the photos on the walls of our wedding, our trips, our life. She stopped in front of a picture of me and Jackson on a hiking trail, both of us muddy and grinning. She stared at it for a long time. Then she turned to Jackson. "You make her happy," she said. It wasn't a question. "I tried," Jackson said simply. My mother nodded. She looked at me. Her eyes were red. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to choose. I'm sorry I didn't ask about your life. I'm sorry I tried to control you instead of just loving you." Her voice cracked. "I thought I was helping. I thought if I pushed you hard enough, you'd have the life I wanted for you. But I didn't stop to ask what you wanted." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I didn't brush them away. "I wanted you to be proud of me," I said. "Not because of who I married or what I looked like or what people thought. Just because I'm your daughter." "I am proud of you," she whispered. I just didn't know how to say it. We didn't fix everything that day. We didn't hug and cry and became best friends. But we sat down at my kitchen table, the 3 of us, and we talked. Really talked. For the first time in years, my mother asked me questions. About my work. About Jackson. About why we chose to get married the way we did. And I answered, honestly, without fear. Because I wasn't afraid of losing her anymore. I'd already survived that. Over the next few months, my mother started showing up. Not often. Not intrusively. But she'd call and ask if she could visit. She'd send texts asking how Jackson's research was going. She even apologized to Aunt Maureen for years of controlling behavior. It wasn't perfect. She still made comments sometimes. She still struggled to let go of her need to manage things. But she was trying. And for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had a mother who saw me. Not the version of me she wanted. Just me. 6 months after the dinner party, my mother hosted another event. A small one. Just family. She invited me and Jackson. When we arrived, she introduced him to everyone. Not as Cassidy's husband like a trophy, but as Jackson. A person. Someone worth knowing. At the end of the night, as we were leaving, she hugged me. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me completely. I pulled back and looked at her. Thank you for finally showing up. As Jackson and I drove home that night, he reached over and took my hand. You did it, he said. Did what? You set a boundary. You held it. And you made her respect it. I thought about that. About the years of hiding. The fear. The anger. The moment at the dinner table when I finally stopped protecting her feelings and started protecting myself. Yeah, I said. I guess I did. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my mother's approval. I wasn't waiting for permission to be happy. I was just living. And that, more than any revenge, was the sweetest victory of all. Here's what I learned from all of this. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're necessary. My mother spent years treating me like I owed her control over my life. And I spent years letting her because I was afraid of losing her. But the truth is, you can't lose someone who is never really seeing you. When I revealed my marriage at that dinner party, I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was trying to show her who I really was. And when she couldn't handle that, when she told me to leave, I realized something important. Her rejection wasn't about me. It was about her. It was about her fear of losing control. Her fear of being wrong. Her fear of being seen as anything less than perfect. And that's not my burden to carry. If you're listening to this and you have a parent, a friend, or a partner who makes you feel like you have to hide parts of yourself to keep the peace, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone access to your life at the cost of your dignity. You don't owe anyone your silence. And you don't owe anyone a relationship that requires you to shrink yourself to fit their expectations. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing people. It's about protecting yourself. And if someone can't respect your boundaries, that tells you everything you need to know about whether they truly love you or just love the version of you they can control. My mother and I are still rebuilding. It's slow. It's messy. But it's real. And that's because I stopped pretending. I stopped performing. I stopped trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. So if you're in a situation where you're hiding who you are, where you're biting your tongue to keep someone else comfortable, I'm telling you right now, stop. Show up as yourself. Set your boundaries. And if people walk away, let them. Because the people who truly love you won't need you to be anyone other than who you are. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment and tell me about a time you set a boundary that changed your life. And if you want more real stories about standing up, speaking out, and taking your power back, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.